The scariest part of sleeping in a truck isn't the fear of someone breaking your window. It's the realization that there is a hollow, unlit storage compartment directly beneath your mattress, and the access hatch is on the outside. Last winter, I locked myself inside my cab to survive a freezing night in the Wyoming desert. I thought I was in a rolling vault. I didn't realize someone was already inside the pitch-black void, right beneath my spine. It was 2:14 a.m. on a freezing Tuesday in November. I was pushing a heavy load of freight straight through the red desert on I-80 West. If you have ever driven that specific stretch between Wamsutter and Point of Rocks, you know it is one of the most desolate, unforgiving environments in the country. It is a high-altitude wasteland. No cell service, no streetlights, just the howling crosswinds and the rhythmic, vibrating roar of a 500-horsepower diesel engine. I was at hour 13 of my logbook. My eyelids were getting dangerously heavy, and the white lines on the road were starting to blur. I couldn't make it to the truck stop in Rock Springs. I had to pull over immediately, or I was going to put the rig in a ditch. I took the next exit, a nameless, unlit gravel chain-up area, surrounded by endless miles of sagebrush. I pulled the air brakes. The heavy, mechanical hiss echoed across the empty dirt lot. I left the massive diesel engine idling to keep the cab warm and power the heater. I went through the standard trucker security ritual. I locked the heavy doors, and I took the seatbelts and looped them tightly through the interior door handles, buckling them in. Even if someone had a master key, they couldn't physically pull the doors open from the outside. I was secured. I climbed into the back, pulled the heavy blackout curtains closed behind the driver's seat, and collapsed onto the lower bunk. The acoustic masking of an idling sleeper cab is absolute. The engine rumble vibrates through the mattress, drowning out the wind and the highway. You can't hear anything outside the truck, but you can feel it. I was drifting off when the mattress slowly shifted beneath my weight. Heavy rigs use active air suspension. When weight shifts on the frame, the airbags automatically inflate or deflate to keep the cab level. While laying perfectly still in the dark, I heard a sharp, mechanical hiss from the air valves under the floorboards, and the entire sleeper cab tilted back just a fraction of an inch. My breathing stopped. We were miles away from another human being. The wind outside was blowing at 40 miles an hour, and the temperature was sitting in the single digits. I didn't open the curtains. I didn't turn on a light. I just listened. Over the low hum of the diesel, I heard a wet, rattling cough. It was so close, it sounded like it was inside the cab with me. Then, I heard a heavy metallic clack. It was the exterior latch of the jockey box. Every sleeper cab has exterior luggage compartments. Metal doors on the outside of the truck where drivers keep heavy tools and extra fluids. What most people don't know is that those exterior compartments open directly into the hollow storage cavity underneath the lower bunk. I was lying on my mattress, and I could hear movement in the dark, hollow space directly beneath my spine. I didn't grab a weapon. I didn't try to look under the bed. I scrambled out of the bunk, tore through the blackout curtains, and threw myself into the driver's seat. I ripped the parking brakes release, threw the transmission into gear, and mashed the throttle. The engine roared, and something heavy slammed against the floorboards from inside the cavity. The heavy rig lurched forward, throwing gravel across the empty lot as I merged violently back onto I-80. I didn't stop. I pushed the truck to 75 miles an hour, praying that the sheer force of the wind and the violent rattling of the trailer would force whoever had climbed into the underbunk storage to bail out. I drove for 3 straight hours, my eyes darting to the mirrors every 5 seconds. I saw nothing but darkness. I didn't stop until I reached the brightly lit, heavily populated distribution center in Salt Lake City as the sun was finally coming up. I pulled into the receiving bay, killed the engine, and grabbed my heavy steel tire thumper. I stepped out of the driver's door and walked around to the back of the cab. The metal catwalk was empty, but the heavy metal door of the exterior jockey box was hanging wide open. I walked closer, my grip tightening on the heavy steel club. I looked inside the dark, hollow compartment that ran directly underneath my bed. It was empty. I stood there in the freezing morning air, staring at the empty metal box. I tried to convince myself it was just some homeless guy, someone who busted the lock to stay warm and jumped out when we hit the mountain passes in Utah. I turned around, climbed back into the driver's seat, and grabbed my logbook. The air inside the sleeper berth was sweltering. It was easily 90 degrees in that small space. I looked down at the floor-level air return vent at the base of my bed. The cheap plastic grate had been popped off. Someone had reached through the open vent hole, grabbed the heavy mechanical override dial on the heating core, and cranked it to its maximum output. Sitting on the interior floorboard, right next to that open hole, was a heavily soiled pair of wool gloves. I stared at the gloves. The physical reality of the night suddenly snapped into place. When I pulled over in Wyoming, I had immediately locked the doors and looped the seatbelts through the interior handles. Nobody could have gotten in from the outside. The exterior jockey box hadn't been pried open from the outside. The latch had been pushed open from the inside. I didn't pull the curtains back to check the sleeper. I didn't try to be a hero with my tire thumper. I backed slowly out of the driver's door, dropped onto the asphalt, and walked straight into the terminal security office to call the Salt Lake police. When the officers finally swept the truck, they didn't find anyone in the jockey box. But they found exactly where he had been staying. They pulled back the heavy blackout curtains on the upper bunk, the bed I never used. Tucked deep against the back wall, hidden under the mattress, was a nest of shredded moving blankets and empty water bottles. And buried in the center of that nest was a crumpled, grease-stained receipt from a diner in Lincoln, Nebraska. A diner I had stopped at 4 days and 800 miles ago. He didn't climb into the slipstream in Wyoming to get out of the wind. He had been living in the upper bunk of my locked truck for half the week. He only climbed down into the floorboards that night because the desert drop in temperature finally made the cab too cold for him to stay up top. He waited until I parked in Salt Lake City, pushed the exterior hatch open, just to make it look like he bailed out on the highway, and simply walked out the back of the terminal while I was packing my bags in the front seat. For 4 days, I locked the doors, looped the seatbelts, and slept in the lower bunk, completely unaware of the man breathing quietly in the dark, just 2 feet above my head. So, if you've ever found something in your truck that you know for an absolute fact wasn't yours, I want to hear about it in the comments down below. Drop a like, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications to join the graveyard shift. We have a lot more stories to cover, and as always, thanks for listening.